Hello and welcome to another edition of the Ascender Academy. It is my absolute pleasure to invite a dear friend, Stacey Havener of Havener Capital. Good morning, how are you?
Good morning. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for having the heat wave pause while I could enjoy some lovely London weather and time with dear friends like you, Stuart. Thank you.
Well, and you also coincide with the World Cup.
Ah, yes.
And we sit here the morning after the night before when England scraped through against the DRC, Democratic Republic of Congo, and you put a little country called Bosnia to the sword 2-0.
Yes.
Well done.
Oh, thank you. And listen, when I'm here, look, I'm cheering for the U.S., of course, but I'm also very much cheering for England. And I have to say, we need to do better.
We need to do a
We
lot
need to do better.
We room for improvement. I think it was a C plus last night.
But we made it. So that's what, I mean, look, that's what matters.
Well,
But
exactly. Well, those who know you will know
Yeah.
that you're a soccer mum, aren't you? And a soccer sort of.
yes, I
you
played soccer. I
yeah?
did play soccer in college and university. And
Are you training? Are you coaching now, or
I
have
did
time?
coach. No, I did coach. Interestingly, my high school soccer coach is how I got into this business, and maybe we can talk about that. But his day job was he was a fund manager. This is in the late '90s, running $1 billion of small cap equity. And when I joined his firm, in addition to working together to build a fund business, I also coached with him. So he coached a girls' youth team that was a feeder for Yale. And that was really fun. But I have not coached since, and I have a 9-year-old daughter who's not currently playing soccer, but we're just going to put that to the side for a minute.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, you need to work on that. Now, those who follow you, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners will follow you, will know you. And I first saw you walking down a beach, Newport
Yes.
Beach.
So, this is a bit of a conversation point because there are two beaches. There are two Newport beaches.
Right. Well, there's
They are
one
on
in California.
opposite sides of the coast. Yes, exactly.
Yeah, my
So-
cousin lives at the other one.
Yeah. So so there's Newport Beach, California. I am not there. I lived in San Diego for a few years, but I have returned home to the East Coast. I am in Newport, Rhode Island.
Right.
And the beach that I am on, for anyone who knows Newport, First Beach is less than a mile from my house, and that's where I'm walking, and that's where I'm doing those videos. It is so funny to me that is what resonates with people. I have been stopped in airports in the UK. Once I was on a plane going on holiday to Jamaica, and someone popped up as I walked by and said, "Oh, you're the gal from who walks on the beach on LinkedIn." And it's just...
Well, as someone who comes from a very famous tourist area in the north of England, Blackpool, I think if I walked down the beach and did what you do, I'd probably get blown into the Irish Sea. So all credit. But I've been in fund distribution for 40 years.
Mm-hmm.
I've learned so much in the last 4 years following you.
Oh, that's so kind
I
of
have
you
to
to
say,
say.
it's an absolute credit to what you've done.
Thank you.
And we're going to dive into
Yes, I'd
into
love
this,
to.
if we may. But before we do that,
Yeah.
just a little bit of background about Havener
Sure.
Capital itself.
Of course.
If we may, and what you
Yes.
do and how you do it.
Yep. So thank you. That was very nice of you to say. It means a lot to me because you are an expert in distribution yourself. So as I mentioned, I didn't plan on being in Wall Street. I actually wanted to be a college professor of literature. So I'm a poet, I'm a storyteller, but I was also paying my way through university, and I was going to have to pay my way through grad school to get my PhD. My high school soccer coach was a fund manager, and he knew my situation. I was going to university locally, so he was coming to my games to support us. And he offered me a job, and he said, you can come here. I'm running $1 billion of small cap equity. This is the late 90s. Very institutional business. I want to launch a fund, and maybe you could help me do that. And I was like, Coach, that sounds great. Just FYI, like, I don't know anything about the fund business. My dad's a math teacher. That's about as far as I'm going to get. But I joined, and the plan was work for a few years and then go on about my way. But as it turns out, there in a world full of men who love numbers, I guess there was a place for a girl who loves words, because not only did we launch the fund, after that was done, he handed me basically a list and said, okay, now the next thing is raise money. Here's a list. Here's a phone. And we raised $500 million in 2 years off of $1 million base.
Blimey.
And the way it took me a long time to unpack this, by the way, but at the heart of it was connecting people with each other. And the best way to do that is through the power of story. So over the years, as I went on to raise multiple billions for, emerging managers, specialist boutiques, new funds, firms on paper that shouldn't be winning, shouldn't be succeeding. I had to actually step back and codify what is it that I'm doing, because I'm doing it repeatedly, but it was sort of unknown to me. It was very below the surface. And there's really 3 things: the art of storytelling, which I mentioned, the science of human behavior, which is why people buy, and the power of personal brand. And that's the blueprint that we use at Havener to help investment boutiques grow. Similar to you, the bulk of my career, the front half, was raising money. This half is more consulting, advising, and training teams to use that blueprint to grow their business.
Yeah. When I first started the industry back in 86,
Yes.
I had 6 competitors. Fidelity weren't even here in the UK.
Isn't
It
that
was
wild?
a tiny, tiny market.
Yeah.
It was a breeze to get in front of fund selectors, although they
Yeah.
weren't really called fund selectors in those days. The challenge today is of another level.
Yes, it is.
And I think you talk about the qualitative versus the quantitative,
Yes.
which I think is so important. And we were talking just before we started recording about, it's a race to the bottom if you just talk about numbers.
That's right.
If you're starting out today as a fund distribution person, how do you get in front of people?
Yes.
This is quite a long answer to probably quite a long question, but it's very challenging to get in front of people with emails. And
Yes.
again, I know fund selectors who've got 22,000 unopened
Yes.
emails.
Can you imagine?
And half of them are from me. So how does a fund distribution expert or beginner
Yes.
get into in front of
It's a
selectors?
great question, and it has gotten more challenging and noisier,
Yep.
as you alluded. So I think this goes back to the crux of people do business with people, even in the investment industry. It's just universally true. What happens to us often in the investment space is because we have a lot of very, very intelligent people in this industry, we think that it's more complicated than it really is. It's complexity bias. So again, to go to the human behavior, the behavioral science piece, we are wired to think things that are complicated work better, are more successful, etc. So how do you get in the door in a noisy world? Show up as a person first. Because before someone chooses you, they need to know you, they need to like you, and they need to trust you. And really, AI can't do that. An email can't really do that. And so how do we get a meeting with someone where we're not pitching first, we're showing up as a person first? And the luncheon that we were both at this week, I talked about something called give, 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 ask.
Love it.
Which is one of our
Absolutely love it.
frameworks. And it's so basic. And if it's a riff on Gary Vee, who has a framework that's similar, except it's jab, 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 hook. And I just don't understand why we're punching our prospects in the face. So I don't like that
I can
one.
name a few. I wouldn't mind doing that, but that's another
But
story.
the give, ask is a great way for people to get in the door. And it basically says, it plays us off of Robert Cialdini's principle of reciprocity, which basically says, when you do something nice, as a human, it feels good to receive that kindness. And if we give without expectation, and we show up as people, and we earn the right to the meeting as a person first, then we can, when we ask for the meeting, it's kind of a no-brainer. If we're friends and I come to London and I say, Stuart, I'm in London, do you want to meet for coffee? Yes, of course. But if you don't know me from anyone and I hit you up and say, Stuart, do you want to meet for coffee? There's a whole bunch of stuff I have to try to do in that one email. I have to get you to know who I am, like me, trust me, think it's a good use of time. And that is just the lift is too heavy.
But unfortunately, we do see it on LinkedIn, and I'm sure you're no
Yeah.
different to me. I get constant
Oh, it's
emails.
awful. Pitch slaps.
Yeah, lead gen.
Yeah.
It's just
It's horrible.
awful.
It's an instant disconnect for me, by the way. If I connect with you and the next thing you do is pitch me in the DMs, we're over.
Yeah.
Like, that's over.
They don't even bother researching you. That's half the problem.
Yeah, it's like, it's not even. And so, but think about that. So let's extrapolate that to how that allocator feels. Emails from us, unsolicited emails from fund managers or distribution teams that show up in an inbox that are a pitch, that are 5 paragraphs long with 18 attachments. Nobody has time for it. No. They don't have time for it, nor do they care, because they don't know you. And so that, I know it sounds basic and simple, but I really think showing up as a person first and making a friend, then figure out if there's business to be done together. But we're flipping that. We're doing it in the wrong order.
Right. You touched on something which I totally get, which is the personality.
Yeah.
And having salespeople with personality. Fund managers, they're a different breed.
Yes, they are.
What are you looking for when you're working with a fund manager? Are you looking for personality? I listened to your podcast with Guy from Dakota, which I thought was very, very good.
Thank you. That was a great
thoroughly
one.
recommend a good listen to the Dakota podcast. They're very good. But Stacey, yours, you talked, I think it was about a fund manager smiling.
Yes.
Should they smile?
Should they smile? Well, I mean, what do you think?
Absolutely.
Right.
Can they walk and talk at the same time, though?
Well, so here's the thing. There is a knock on fund managers that is they have big egos. They're all the negative things that go with that. And look, I've met fund managers who have big egos and are jerks and all the things. But more often than not, what is happening when we sense that they're quiet, they're standoffish, it's that they're out of their comfort zone. Mm-hmm. When you put a fund manager in a meeting or ask them to do a podcast or ask them to take the stage, that is not their unique ability. And guess what? They're human, and they're nervous, and they're uncomfortable. And we have this unfair expectation on them that they should show up and show off, and they don't know how. And so much of my success, weirdly, my biggest successes were with some personalities that would have been the most challenging for someone to market. In fact, one of them, the fund manager, had a lot of challenges. He was autistic. He was legally blind. It was very difficult to follow him in a meeting. And so when I took on this mandate, they said, you can't have him in meetings. You can't. Now, he's the founder, and he's a brilliant mind, a beautiful mind. And I said, I disagree. The trick with him is to put him in a position to shine. If you ask someone like that to come into a meeting and go through a 15-step risk management process, how is it going to go? Horribly. But if I'm able to pull that allocator aside and say, here's what's going to happen. This person's going to come in at the end, and here's the deal with this person. And he's amazing, or she's amazing, and we're just going to let them go, and I have no idea what's going to happen, but it's going to be awesome. We just have to give them the space to do it. Then when that person walks in and they are everything we sort of eye roll about a fund, they're over here, they're tangenting, they're laughing at their own jokes, we can't even follow, they're doing math in their head and sort of calculator talk, then you're kind of like, it's charming, it's them, it's authentic, it's a sign of their brilliance. So I feel like it's almost an expectation mismanagement. There are people who are there are fund managers who are very good at sales and marketing, but that is not common.
That's the rare one. There are I've worked with a couple of those, sort of people, but equally, 90%. You have to work with them, and again, something that I heard you talk about before, which is from the sales perspective.
Yes.
The salesperson has to manage that meeting and
Oh.
bring the fund manager with them and bring the asset
Yes.
allocator to the table.
Yes.
Are there some easy lessons? I mean,
Yeah.
we've talked about making it easy.
Yes.
But are there some easy lessons that a
Sure.
salesperson should do when it comes
Yes,
to
I
working
think
with a fund
so.
manager?
So the first, it's a great point, and I feel this is also one of the secrets to my success, but it's sort of it's a basic. So on one hand, you have the meeting where the salesperson and the fund manager come in and the allocator's there, and the salesperson says, Stuart, this is Bob, and here we are, and they don't say anything.
Yeah, no added value.
No. And the perception there is that the job of the salesperson was to set the meeting and then stop talking. And I think that's an incredible disservice, partly because of what we just talked about fund managers not being in their unique ability, where this is actually the genius zone of the salesperson, if you allow them to lean into it. So there has to be trust between fund manager and salesperson. In my opinion, that relationship is one of the most underrated relationships in an asset management firm.
Totally agree.
So if the fund manager doesn't trust or give the salesperson the ability to lead the meeting, well, that's, we're not going to get off the schneid on that one. So but the salesperson before the meeting can make sure that you're on the same page with that fund manager. So one of the things we do is we have a meeting prep template. It's one page.
Okay.
This meeting prep template is basically like a cliff note or cheat sheet for that fund manager. And it says, here's who we're meeting. Here's kind of what you need to know about them as a person and about the conversation so far. Here's the goal of the meeting, which is not typically to get a check, right? Especially a first meeting has one goal, get a second meeting.
Yep.
Right? So we outline the goal, we outline what we think based on our conversations with this allocator, what they want to go over, where we think there might be challenges, where they might be struggling, what's in their way. We give that to the fund manager. Now, here's where the rubber meets the road. If I email you that, I have no idea if you looked at it. And you're the fund manager, I'm the salesperson. So if we're in the car, or we're taking a taxi, we're going to the meeting, guess what I'm going to do? Print it and put it in your face and say, okay, Stuart, we need to look at this.
Yeah, let's discuss this.
Let's look at this. Mm-hmm. And what it does is over time, as those meetings are successful, the fund manager starts relying on you as a salesperson and on those meeting preps. Mm-hmm. And it becomes almost like being on stage together. Mm. Because they then learn that you've got their back. You're not going to let them go on a tangent or go, say something wrong. You're going to stop them from doing that. You're in control of the meeting. You're making sure the allocator's getting their questions answered. Mm. And that synergy is what you want to work toward, but you just have to sort of baby step towards it, if that makes sense.
Let's be clear, though, when the salesperson isn't replacing the fund manager.
Not at all.
They're not a CFA.
No, they're like Jimmy Fallon.
Yeah.
You're the Jimmy Fallon of the meeting.
We have Jonathan.
Do you have Jimmy Fallon?
Well, we have Jonathan Ross.
Okay, you're that.
Or the Irish guy who I can't remember the name. But again, my own background, back in the day, we used to, if it was a difficult question, we'd go, another glass of wine? Or as one of the sales guys always said, more cheese?
Yeah.
Because we weren't trained to understand what the fund managers. We did the classic walk in, hi, fund manager, allocate, and then just sit there, make a few notes.
Yeah.
And I know that's something you...
I do. I love a good notebook. Yep.
But today, the sales guys have really got to not just understand the story, and we'll talk about storytelling in a moment, but understand what the end game is. I mean, there's always a goal to a meeting.
That's right.
The first goal is to get the second meeting.
Yeah.
But do you find that a lot of salespeople fail to understand that the process and understand their position in that.
Yes, I think so, and it's a great point because it's a disservice to them because the industry has not taught this,
No.
and so it's an unlearning and a relearning.
Well, there's very little sales training in the investment
Yeah.
management
Well,
world.
do you remember this one? The stand and deliver training?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, no one wants that.
No.
An allocator doesn't want to be pitched to or talked at or walk through your 75 slides.
Well,
What a snore.
Well, actually, that's a very good segue into another thing which you talk about, which absolutely resonates with me.
Yeah.
Is the ditch
The pitch. Yeah.
and the deck.
Oh.
And my own, I remember some years ago working for a large house here in London, and I forgot I was head of distribution. My head of institution was with me. We're heading over to Northern Trust in Canary Wharf. I said, oh, by the way, let's have a quick look at the deck.
Yeah.
He threw me the yellow pages.
I'm
It was
sorry.
about
It's
300
horrible.
pages. And I said, we've got 45 minutes. How the hell are we going to do this? And I learned a valuable lesson. One is to, before you go, check the deck.
Yeah.
And then secondly, we didn't. He said, well, we're only going to look at page 16 and 24. And I said, well, why have we got the other pages?
Yeah.
The lesson there, and I think is something that, again, resonates for yourself, which is actually, don't look at the deck. Let's have a conversation.
That's right.
You talk about storytelling.
Yes.
For a viewer, what do you mean by that? What's
Yeah.
your storytelling heritage?
Yeah, yes. So it's a great point, and it's not that the pitch deck is not important, by the way. It's just resetting the level of its importance and when to use it and how. That's really what it is. You still need it.
Yeah.
It's a prop. I think what happens for most fund managers is it's not a prop, it's the center of the entire universe of that meeting. Right? It's not a prop, it's everything. So ditch the pitch is basically about flipping the script on how those meetings have typically been done.
Right.
And storytelling is a big part of it. So to go back to human behavior and behavioral science for a minute, this stat always sort of blows everyone away. But behavioral science tells us that a prospect thinks a meeting is a good meeting when they speak 70% of the time.
Yeah.
Now, in an hour meeting, that means the prospect would speak for 42 minutes. I've done a lot of meetings, as I know you have. I've never been in a meeting where the prospect spoke for 42. Have you? No. So, however, directionally, I think this is a good North Star. If we can get it to 50-50, that's better than what it typically is, which is like 90-10 in favor of the fund manager.
Yeah.
And the easiest way to get the prospect on the board, if that's a scoreboard of time, is at the beginning. Okay? And so typically, the old way of doing a pitch meeting is that, the salesperson glad hands, da-da-da, and here's this, and here's who everyone is. And then the pitch starts.
Yeah.
Really. And the new way is, as you said, it's to have a conversation, not a presentation. And so my preferred way of doing that is to ask the allocator to tell us about them. If they're the founder, it's a great time to have them do the founder's journey. If they're not the founder, it's a great time to have them talk about the origin of the firm, what makes them different, who they serve, and then getting all the way down to, okay, and what's going on right now in this asset class? And what are you guys thinking about? What's the investment committee talking about?
These are the whys I've heard you talk about before.
No, this is slightly different. This is more getting so it does two things. It gets the prospect talking, gets the allocator talking. It also allows us, as the fund management side, to put ourselves in their shoes more.
Right.
And it gives that fund manager context around whatever they're going to say. So let's say I'm Jimmy Fallon, because I'm running the meeting, so I'm asking these questions. By the way, I've already talked to the allocator before this. This is not a surprise to them.
Right.
Okay, but that's like a whole nother
That's the
podcast
preparation.
episode. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but now we're in the meeting, and I've also told the fund manager we're going to do that. And now, when I feel it's a good point to transition, 15 minutes or less probably, I can then say, that's great. Stuart, would it be helpful to have Bob tell us a little bit about his journey and how we came to be sitting here today? And then I'm going to turn over to they're going to do their backstory. And then I'm going to make sure that we're pulling threads that we heard from that 15-minute conversation about who they are as a firm, the clients they serve, what's important to them, what they're struggling with or thinking about on the asset allocation side. And it's really just a conversation at that point, a moderated conversation.
I think the point I would take from that is that the pre-meeting preparation
Is massive.
is huge. It's so vital.
Yeah.
And I think most, and I don't want to do a disservice to the sales industry here in the UK, but all across Europe, is most salespeople just walk into the meeting
Yeah.
and they know where they're going, and they, in the sense of the geography of where they're going,
Yeah.
they know the name of the individual. But that's it. They haven't
Yeah.
sort of looked around, and which brings me on to a point we touched on briefly, which is the give ask.
Yeah.
And LinkedIn,
Yeah.
which is the big social network that we
Yeah.
in the business community we follow. Do you see LinkedIn as a way of getting that information? And I think I know the answer to this, but how should a salesperson use LinkedIn when it comes to engaging with a potential?
Yes. It's a great point. Look, this goes to the third differentiator for us, which is that power of personal brand. And that really is around people doing business with people. So personal brands enter rooms before you. They're in rooms you're not even in. There could be somebody talking about the luncheon we had this week right now, and I'm not in the room, I'm with you.
Yep.
So that's the power of personal brand. LinkedIn is great for that, and it's multi-directional, as you said, because on the one hand, the fund manager or the salesperson can build their personal brand on LinkedIn so that people can know, like, and trust them before they ever walk in the room. And on the other hand, it's an incredible research tool in preparation for finding the right investor to have meetings with. Engaging that investor before you ever ask for the meeting. Making a friend. I mean, I am in London it's not even almost, entirely because of LinkedIn. Entirely. It changed my life. It's given me some of my closest friends. It's helped our business in ways I couldn't even imagine. And so it is many things in one, and really underutilized in our industry. Really underutilized.
It's also overused in the wrong way, though, isn't it? Going back to my point earlier on about lead gen, people sending in mails and stuff. Do you find that if a company's going out there promoting themselves, should they use LinkedIn in the same, just putting up a fact sheet?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I've got this big issue. I've got lots of issues, but there's particular issues, and this I'm coming down towards content and the information sharing between meetings or before meetings and so on. Because I always used to say to a fund manager, between fact sheets, which are dull as ditch water, I've got nothing to say if you don't tell me something to share with me. So content is vital. Where do you see the mistakes or maybe the opportunities as well for fund managers and fund management salespeople to utilize content? What sort of content should they be using as LinkedIn? Direct?
So I think, again, LinkedIn, if done well, is not just a brochure or a company post with an advertisement, basically. It is a place, if done well, where people can actually connect. That's what it's designed to do, right? It's a social media platform. The social part is often lost. Because if you just post a bunch of stuff, even if it's great, you might think your fact sheet's great. It's hard to engage with that. It's sort of static information. It says nothing about the people.
I've seen some bad fact sheets.
Yeah, and I'm not going to make a friend with a fact sheet or a logo and ask to meet somebody for a cup. I can't take a logo for a cup of coffee. It's just a very one-way street. And LinkedIn really wants connection to happen. So this also goes to the most common rebuttal, I guess, on LinkedIn, which is compliance. And if you try to talk about all the stuff, the fact sheet stuff and the portfolio holdings and all the performance, you run into a whole bunch of compliance issues because culture of compliance, we're all in it. But if you show up as a person and you talk about what you think, what, your lived experience, you talk about a conference you went to and 3 takeaways. You talk about a little bit about your personal life or what you're into. Like, I play soccer, I'm training for a triathlon, which might be the end of me. Those types of things. You allow people to see you in a different way that they can't see in a fact sheet.
Yep.
So that, to me, is really where the magic is. And Sean Pesh here in the UK is... he's brilliant at this. He used LinkedIn to build his firm. It was a pivotal...
It was £50 million.
$50 million in September 22.
Yeah.
I saw him yesterday for lunch. 2.7. Amazing.
Yeah.
Right?
Performance has helped him.
But here's the thing.
That's the
you
backup.
need to be good at what you do.
Yeah.
So that's table stakes.
Yeah.
Performance isn't. It's required.
Yeah.
But that's not enough.
I would say performance keeps you in the room.
Yeah.
Getting into the room is the challenge.
Yeah.
And that's where that personality.
It is.
And we haven't touched on values, which I always think is a core element of a business. When we talk about personality, I always think about the core values of the firm, the individual, and hopefully the individual reflects the values of the organization. How do you feel that values should come across in a social media sense, or just messaging? How do you get that message out about who you are and what you stand for?
Yes, I think it's a great point. And culture, there's a lot of work being done on culture alpha. Is there some potential for outsized return based on the culture and values of a company? And that's being done in the public investment world. And it's also, worth reflecting on for all of us, even on the other side. Values and differentiators are really tough because the tendency is to go to things that, of course, should be true. So, and my friend Dan Mikulskis here in the UK, who's now the CIO of People's Pension, I learned this from him in I think it was like my second podcast I ever did 3 years ago. And he said, differentiators can't be truisms. Now, we actually implemented this. We have a truism test based on this conversation I had with Dan, which is basically to say, the test is the opposite of that differentiator a viable business? Right. So, for example, it has to be in order for it to be a true differentiator. So a truism would be something like, well, let's just say a differentiator is our people are great. Okay, is the opposite of that viable? Our people are not great. We hire not great people. No.
We've all made mistakes.
But that's how we're trying to do.
Right.
So that can't be a differentiator because, of course, that should be true. So I think with some of these the culture bits, the differentiators, the values, they're so important, but it really takes work to make them sharp. The other thing that I firmly believe about differentiators is that they have 2 jobs. Attract the right client to you and repel the wrong one.
Okay.
And what happens is it takes a lot of courage and bravery to repel.
Yes, that's exactly what I was thinking then. Can you expand on what you mean by that?
Okay.
What is a bad client? I mean, I think it could be a trading client, someone just in and out. But
so this is a great point because a lot of fund managers think, well, I'm for everyone. All dollars are green and they're all for me. But But the reality is, in the work that we do with clients on story and on narrative, the first thing we do before we even get to the stories is we ask, who are you speaking to? And the challenge there is typically that target market is way too broad. It's actually almost easier to look at it in the wealth management side. So let's say I'm a wealth manager, and if or you are, and I say to you, Stuart, so what's your target market? And you say ultra high net worth, which is what almost every wealth firm says.
Yep.
How big is that market? And do they have any specific challenges? They're all going to have different ultra high net worth in what? Okay. Are they entrepreneurs? Are they CEOs of public companies? Did they have stock options that they converted? All of those ultra high net worth people have very unique challenges. And we have to get to the place where we can speak specifically to what someone is going through. They need to feel seen. The hard part here is if I say, again, I'm not going to go to the fund manager, still sitting in the advisor seat because it's easier. If I say that we're an advisory shop that serves founders and all my content is around that, I think to myself, darn, I just lost so much business from like CEOs of public companies. The reality is, if you're serving founders and they're happy, you might not actually know how to serve the CEO of a public company because they're going to have different needs and different challenges. So it's a little bit of a land grab that we want, that we have to be careful and really challenge ourselves to say, who are we for right now? Who are we the best fit for?
One of the things I often find challenging in this industry, and we both come from a fund sales background, third-party marketers are key to what we do. We work with a lot of them. We choose the best. We believe the best. But the biggest challenge often is the management of expectations between the fund manager and the TPM.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Welcome to my life for many years.
So there's the classic meeting. We discussed it briefly beforehand, but the fund manager comes to a meeting with the TPM. The following day, fund manager phones up the TPM and says, "Where's the ticket?"
Yeah.
This is not excuse the expression, it's not a one-night stand. This is a long-term loving relationship you're building here. Where do you see the challenges when it comes to that sort of relationship?
Specifically with TPMs. Okay. So look, that's how I started my business. So we still have one legacy client that we're raising for. Okay. But that was my world. And it is very difficult in terms of expectation management. Yeah. The first thing, which is basic 101, is to make sure that you're aligned on what success looks like for that fund manager and you're okay with it. So, for example, when we were doing due diligence on a potential third-party marketing client, one of the questions I would ask, and we still ask this even of our consulting clients, okay, so what does success look like 3 years from now? Paint me a picture. They're probably going to go to a number, but then also challenge, and what types of clients do you have? This goes back to the previous conversation we just had. Are you flying around and doing finals presentations and sort of having to go do these face-to-face, or are you working with family offices? And, so we qualitative as well. And then come back to a year. So start at 3. And what does it look like in a year? And make sure you're okay with the number they say. Also realize the number will move on you. So a red flag for me, if I was talking with a fund manager and they said, well, I need $1 billion yesterday. That deal is over. I am not taking that. And the reason is the expectations are too high. Yep. It's like the rent is too high, right? We're never going to be able to make you happy.
Yep.
So it's both on the size of the raise that they're looking for and the time frame.
Yep.
And really, like you said with a fundraising meeting, it's the work you do before you sign the deal, before you get the meeting. It's the work you do. Before you sign this client, it's the work you do to make sure, are we aligned? What are their expectations around meetings? How many meetings a week do they want?
Yeah. I think one of the advice that I give to fund managers is, well, one, if you don't have a distribution strategy,
Yeah.
forget it. Because investment strategy is all very well, but not being able to raise assets.
Oh, you have no business.
You've got no business. And I think if my advice to fund managers is really engage with the third-party marketers, understand how they work, understand what their expectations are, and then work with their expectations and make sure that they understand what your expectations.
That's right. It's alignment.
Because it's critical, and give them time, because it is we're in this for the long game.
I mean,
life is short, but we're in it for the long game.
Yeah, average sales cycle 12 to 18 months.
Exactly.
And many of them are longer than that. I know that makes people want to poke their eyes out, but like, you need to hear that especially if you're setting up your own firm or launching a new fund, which, by the way, if you're launching a new fund, even if you're a multi-billion-dollar established pedigreed shop, when you launch something new, we talked about this at the luncheon, you're back in startup mode, my friend.
Yep.
Like, it's a different game.
Oh, massively.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's true if you are an actual startup or emerging manager, or if you are, a well-established pedigreed firm that's launching something new. It's a different distribution strategy.
Yeah. Well, I think fund managers, they should focus on what they do best, generating alpha in investment, and allowing the alpha generation with regard to distribution with either sales.
I agree
teams or
100% with that.
Stacey, we've come to the end of our time together. It's been an absolute delight.
So fun.
Thank you for coming to the UK. You brighten up. Actually, a pretty dull day today, but you walk in the room and everything's great. So
I appreciate that.
we
Thank
really appreciate your
you.
time today. We look forward to seeing you. You come to the UK quite a lot these days, so
yes,
hopefully
once
we'll
a
catch
quarter.
up. Once a quarter now, is it?
Yes.
Well, I think we're with border control on that one. No, it's been great to see you.
Yes, thank you.
Popping in to see us.
I've loved our time together, and I'm happy to come back whenever you need me.
Many thanks, Stacey.
Thanks.